Hi, everybody. My name is Serena Brians, and I'm a therapist with a practice here in Dublin 15. And today I wanted to talk to you about self-care. Self-care, I think, gets a bad rap a lot of the time because we have been confusing it with selfishness. So a lot of the time we hear that self-care is selfish and indulgent. And in fact, I would say that self-care is necessary for us to be able to preserve the resources that we already have so that we can continue to care for others and ourselves. Um, Being selfish is often seen as a negative thing, and I think that maybe that comes from a story we were told when we were growing up, that to be selfish is wrong, and self-care gets very mixed up with that. But in fact, self-care is neither selfish nor indulgent. It's a necessary practice for us to be able to get the most from our own resources and to help us to share the resources that we have as best we can with others, which is not selfish at all or indulgent. A lot of the time I would hear clients say that self-care is a luxury you can't afford. And that comes from, I think, people's perceptions or misconceptions about what self-care is and isn't. And we're going to talk about those a little later. I've also heard that it's only when I feel exhausted or overwhelmed that I need self-care. And really, at that point, it's almost too late to start self-care. The idea of practicing self-care is to prevent you becoming overwhelmed or exhausted, or certainly to prolong that process as much as possible by minding yourself as best you can, which would include taking adequate rest and breaks where possible to avoid you becoming exhausted and overwhelmed. Self-care gives me even more to add to my to-do list, and I don't have time. And of course, when you are overwhelmed or exhausted and not practicing self-care, it's very easy to feel that you just can't take any more things on. And if you are caring for others or very busy in work, obviously something that is self-care, so something that is about you and not others, is going to go absolutely to the bottom of the list. So if you have a to-do list, self-care will be at the very bottom of it, and you'll often find that you just never quite get to that bit of it. I would say that self-care is a practice and needs to be a practice. So that's something that you can continue on a daily basis. Self-care this is what is conjured up for lots of people when you hear the term self-care. So it's like candles and bubble baths. And that absolutely can be a part of self-care. But it's not all about self-care. It's not all that it is. Self-care is really about caring for all of the needs that we have as humans. And our needs would be our physical, social, mental, spiritual, and emotional needs, helping us to continue to grow like this little plant in the tarmac there. Whatever it is that is helping us to continue to grow, even in difficult circumstances like this little guy. That is caring for ourselves. So as we move through this, maybe I would ask you to firstly remember that self-care is a practice. It's not something that you're just going to do once or a lot of once. So going away for a weekend when that's possible to do again, for a spa weekend, yes, that is self-care, but that's not the practice of self-care. Doing that once a year when you're exhausted or overwhelmed, that's not going to nourish you as best as you need nourishing. So it is more about incorporating small changes into our lives that we can do on a daily basis, which becomes our practice of self-care. And like anything else that we practice, the more we practice, the better we get. Self-care can be something as simple and as joyous as taking a walk in the rain, which is something that I love to do. It can be taking some time, quiet time for yourself, and reading a book, taking some time just to think or listen to music or meditate or have some mindfulness. It can also be creating. If creating makes you feel good, whether that's a piece of art or whether that's music or baking, if that's what is feeding your soul, that is self-care. So make some time to do that where you can. It could be around a golf, or as now that the lockdown restrictions have eased a little bit, golf is open to us and available to us, or some other exercise like tennis, which would be fueling a couple of the needs that we have. So that would be helping us with our social needs, but also with our physical needs, which can help our mental health and our emotional health. So some of the things that don't take time or money, that are not a luxury that we cannot afford, are self-care. And sometimes it is doing something, and sometimes it's doing less of something. So nourishing your body is a very simple one that takes care of our physical needs. Whether that is, as I say, nourishing your body with good food, eating well at appropriate times rather than grabbing a sandwich at your desk, or skipping a meal altogether, or just grabbing something fast on the go. To take the time to sit and enjoy a meal that is good for your physical health. Taking a walk is another simple one that doesn't cost anything. And, a lot of us are maybe out, if you have small children at the moment, you're out walking with them. And that is exercise, but maybe you might prefer to take a walk alone, even 1 or 2 of the days a week. And if you can do that, if you have somebody that you can share the childcare with, well, then take that walk alone, take your children out. And then one of my clients takes children out in the afternoon, but she gets up early in the morning and goes out for a walk alone. And gives her the headspace to take on the rest of the day. Meeting with friends is looking after your social needs, but also self-care can be limiting the meeting with friends. And I suppose it's about you deciding what is caring for yourself in that space and what is not. Just like limiting your news intake. We don't want to bombard ourselves. It's not healthy to bombard ourselves all of the time with the news, particularly at the moment, which is telling us to stay safe. There's lots of negativity happening. Then listening to that on a loop, which is easily done at the moment, is not necessarily good for our mental or emotional or spiritual well-being. So maybe limiting that to listening to the news maybe once or possibly twice a day. Something very simple that I have found really useful is just starting a gratitude journal. And this is something that I've done for many years. And I find it really helpful just at the end of the day to write down 3 or 4 or 5 things that you're grateful for. And that doesn't necessarily need to be what you're grateful for that day, though absolutely, that's a good starting point, but just grateful for generally. And even at our lowest times, I think we can find something that we are grateful for. And that helps to focus our mind, I suppose, on the positives that we have, because we can spend a lot of time and get lost a lot in the worry and worrying about the negatives. So to just give our mind a chance to recharge and focus on some of the positives is a really powerful experience. If you've ever been on an airplane, you will have seen these illustrations. The air steward during the safety demonstration always tells us to put your own mask on first. And really that's what self-care is. It's about putting your own mask on first. It's ensuring that if you are safe and well and nourished adequately, that you can then share those resources with the others around you. So put your own mask on first. Self-care is not selfish. Write a list of what you can do to look after yourself. Take a cup of tea later on, sit down and write a list of what kind of self-care practices you feel that you can incorporate into your life. And if you're having trouble doing that, maybe think of it as writing a self-care list for your best friend if she was in your position. What would you be asking him or her to do? What would you be suggesting for them? Because often we're very good at seeing how others can care for themselves or how we can care for others. And if we can turn some of that empathy and love back towards ourselves, that gives us a really good start for self-care. Make a commitment to yourself that you're going to try to incorporate self-care as a practice into your life. And it is a practice. Self-care is not something that we do on an annual or semi-annual basis, or something that we do, as I say, when we feel overwhelmed. Small changes, like we have mentioned already, can make a great difference to our self-care and how we nourish ourselves. Remember that it is a practice and it is progress and not perfection. Like any other practice, the more you do it, the better at it you will become. And lastly, remember that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So it's about taking care of yourself first.